Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Jeff Howe, CJ Vogel of On Texas Football. Thank you to Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm, sponsor of each and every state of the program on Wednesday. Jerry Hamilton's off doing an interview with some folks for this show. So CJ and Jeff standing in. We're going to talk a little Longhorn football. And guys, the topic for this week's state of the program, pretty simple. Arch Manning era begins. And as such, he's the leader of this offense. So we're going to talk a little Longhorn offensive football today. And let's start with Arch Manning. A lot has been made about how this offense might be different this year with Arch Manning as opposed to Quinn Ewers, what Arch brings to the table that maybe Quinn Ewers did not, and what, frankly, Quinn Ewers may bring to the table that Arch doesn't as a strength. Let's start with how we think this might be different overall. What are the strengths that Arch Manning brings to the table? First, I think we know this intuitively, but it needs to be said. Athleticism at the quarterback position, be it the QB run game. We saw what he did against A&M, for example, with a big touchdown run. That huge, long touchdown run against a lesser opponent in UTSA. Sark clearly liked to waggle him out on plays early in the season to get his legs moving. So athleticism and run game is certainly one of that piece that could have a multiplying effect in address one of Sark's what has been a real bugaboo the last 2 years, and that's his red zone offense, having a quarterback to mitigate those issues. So that's one that I think everybody understands and gets. Let's talk about him, though, as a thrower, if y'all don't mind. Mm-hmm. Jeff, I'm going to start with you. What is it that Arch Manning does as a thrower, or as we go into this Arch Manning era, as we described it, what does he do that you think is fundamentally different than what Quinn Ewers necessarily brought to the table?
Look, Sark's offense, we know it's an RPO-based offense. So the RPO is going to be in there, I think. But I think what you're going to see more of with Arch, where you didn't from Quinn, whereas Quinn, it was about timing and precision and a lot of those glances and slants and the quick hitting stuff, get the ball out fast in the quick game off of RPOs. I think with Arch, you're going to see more of the longer developing stuff, more true play action. We talked about, hey, back to the defense kind of play action, where now – a lot of that's going to have to do with how does your offensive line look? What does your run game look like? There's going to be a lot that goes into that. But, Bobby, I think what it's really going to open up is a lot of the deeper developing routes that Sark likes in this offense, because Arch's escapability is going to give you more margin for error if things break down in front of him than you had with Quinn. So we're talking about your 12 to 15 yard, your deeper comebacks, your in-breaking routes, your crossers, routes like your fade stops, your 15-yard fade stops, those back shoulder throws. I think more of that stuff is going to be in for Arch. Look, Quinn could make those throws, but I think for me, it goes back to the ability of Arch to escape pressure and use his legs to get out of pressure. That's going to make that stuff more palatable for Sark to call. I think, like I said, just gives you a little bit more margin for error.
What do you think, CJ? What's the different style? We talk about back shoulder, more downfield throws, that sort of thing. What about you? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I look back to what Quinn in that offense looked like last year. It felt like he had to grind out possession after possession, right? And then, that's not a bad thing. You put up a lot of points, right? You were able to get a lot of yards, but at that point, and we've talked about it, Jeff, with Rod Babers, at some point when you rack up multiple 15-play drives or 10-play drives, the margin for error increases. And I look at those two drives against Texas A&M and say, yeah, that was just too many snaps in the third quarter on those specific drives that led to vulnerability in that offense, right? You had the interception, you had the forced fumble. That happens. With Arch, I see just a complete facelift of an offense.
When you say facelift, you mean just entirely different then?
I do. I think that you're going to see more shots downfield, to Jeff's point, the longer lasting and developing routes down the field. I see the way I was going to describe it was flashy grit, because I think it's twofold. You're going to have the flashy plays. You're going to have the big plays to Ryan Wingo. DeAndre Moore, we know what they can do, but I also think there's going to be a level of grit to that as well, knowing, hey, you now have a quarterback that can get under center and pick you up 1 yard on the 3rd or 4th and 1 by the goal line. You now have a guy that can scramble and get you 2 or 3 on a 4th down when the play breaks down. You need him to create, right? It's not necessarily just they're going to be throwing the ball 80% down the field and completing it at that level. But to me, those flashy plays are going to be there more prevalent. They're going to be there more often. I mean, you look at what Sarkisian has done previously, specifically at Alabama with quarterbacks that can hit downfield with wide receivers that can stretch the field. That's what I'm looking at. But also, we've seen Arch 2024. What was he asked to do in the playoff? What was he asked to do against Texas A&M? Come in and pick up 3 yards. And that grittiness, I think, is going to be something that is, in a way, kind of contagious around this team. So whether it's the inside run game that takes a step forward or not, you're going to have a quarterback that can pick you up those yards, where previously it was a quarterback that probably lost you those yards.
Yeah, you weren't running. Quinn Ewers on a quarterback sneak was just a failed call. He didn't have that kind of base really to grind out an extra yard. Arch Manning trunk, he's got a really strong lower body, clearly a guy that can do that. I look at, and I like what you're saying, CJ, about a facelift, because when Steve Sarkisian came over from Alabama, we had all seen Mac Jones just go absolutely wild with Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle and those guys. I mean, they were running so free. Mac Jones was buying just a tad more time in the pocket, I think, than Quinn Ewers typically did for Texas, allowing those guys with their speed to get more and more open. And I think you saw more downfield throws, more ISOs on slot receivers versus linebackers. In fact, because I don't think, while the game has changed in the last 3 or 4 years and people are now putting, DBs on those slot receivers through and through and not trying to carry them through with a linebacker. I think that I see what y'all are saying, and I agree that I think we could be looking at a facelift. I don't know about the grit part that you're discussing. I think it'll be a much bigger play offense. Hopefully, though, when push comes to shove in November and in December, I do think they've got to showcase that grit, because that's going to be whether or not you get in the playoffs. I really believe that, because early in the season, you're going to get away with making some big plays, have some big things happen for you. But in November, December, you got to be able to, if it's 80 yards, you got to go get it to seal a game like they did at Arkansas, right? Or against Alabama the year before. You got to go do that. And so I hear what you're saying. I do.
That grittiness that was lacking in 24 would have picked you up that yard against Ohio State that you needed to tie the game. That I think you're going to have that with Arch Manning under center in 25.
Yeah. If it just comes down as simple as that, I think that's one thing. But I think he adds more to the passing game than people are going to give credit for. Yeah. The other part about your facelift comment, that quick outs or quick things, the wide receiver quick game is going to probably take a step back, or less of an emphasis. Not take a step back, because it's still going to be there, but a lower emphasis.
Yeah.
And that's, as we look at the Arch Manning era and what all it could entail, I'm just excited about it, because I do feel like both of y'all you're hitting the nail on the head in different ways, in that, look, it's just going to be fundamentally different than what Texas fans have seen, and and I want to say this, what Texas opponents have come to defend against Sark. And that can be a little bit of a surprise to the Brent Venables of the world.
Yeah.
Right. And those type of defensive coordinators who are accustomed to competing against a Quinn Ewers whose number they had at some level at times. Right. So we'll see how that goes.
If you think about it from this standpoint, Bobby, like, think about the 2 playoff games Texas had against Clemson and Arizona State. There were times, especially against Clemson with Cade Klubnik, where PK, they had the right call. They executed it. Everything was right. But the quarterback's ability to extend the play, keep it alive with his legs, it's the one thing you can't account for. And to your point, for all the good things Quinn did, it did feel like, hey, once you got this figured out, you had a way to really slow Texas down and stymie that offense. Now you've got that unknown variable that a running quarterback gives you, that advantage you've got, a guy that can extend the play. Now Texas, the Sarks got that unknown variable, that X factor you can't account for. Now he's got that. Now you can't plan for that to happen, but like I said, it does increase the margin for error. I think, changing the launch point for the quarterback, get him moving, get him rolling out more, help. I think that helps out an offensive line that's going to have to take some time early in the year to come together. So I agree. It's going to be there are going to be staples of this offense that we recognize, that we say, hey, we remember that from, Sark's first year in certain play calls or certain situations we see. But there's going to be a lot of stuff that's different. I think a lot of it's going to be different. And I think it all goes back to, even if Arch only has, officially like 2 carries a game, the fact that you have to respect the +1 in the run game, it's something Texas hasn't had under Sark yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would add this on top of what you're saying, Jeff, that just complements it. I think Sark is looking for maybe a more high. I mean, he's looking for a higher scoring offense.
Yeah.
And part of that has come because last year is because of red zone, 23 red zone. And we just, the very first thing we talked about was that ability to do it. And Quinn Ewers, and this is what I want to say on top of what you were talking about, that extra element. How many off-schedule plays did Quinn Ewers make in 2024? Yeah. Now, one of them, I'll give you an example. One of them was the step up in the pocket to Gunnar Helm over the middle against Michigan. Okay, that's one. Another one was maybe that run against A&M down the sideline. Okay, 30-yard run, not expected. Last one I remember that was really off schedule, that wasn't dialed up, and was the third down against Ohio State, where he kind of got it out late to Trey Weiser on a pit. But those, what I'm getting at with those are few and far between. Okay. Yeah. Sam Leavitt and Cade Klubnik, okay, two quarterbacks that gave Texas defense problems in the playoffs. They had more than that in single games. Yeah. We're not talking about it all year long. We're talking about single games. That's how a lot of teams become great, really good football teams. Yeah. Their quarterback is mobile and able to elevate the team as a whole. Jared, all right, check.
We talk about red zone because that's the most glaring issue, right? And it has been for 2 years. It's just kind of compounded year after year. But to me, what more than anything is going to help with is those third quarter lulls, right? You get to a second and third down, you need a first down to just give your defense a breath and allow them to recoup on the sideline. You're not going to have 110 plays like you did against Arizona State, where your defense is huffing and puffing going into double overtime. Look, because you have a quarterback that will pick up yards on his own or extend plays to find somebody down the field, you can then extend your own offensive drives and contain the ball, time possession, own it that way. And that was a complete lack of the Texas offense in 24. You didn't see much of it in 23. And that, to me, I think the third quarter woes just – I can't explain those, but I think they'll be put by the wayside with Arch Manning as well.
Having as we talk about the Arch Manning era beginning here at Texas with the spring ball talk next week, having his uncles be Peyton and Eli, and here we are. We're not talking about his right arm as much as we are his legs. Yep. I find that somewhat fascinating. All right, we're going to talk next about the wide receiver core and maybe who he can develop a rapport with. That's going to be a big piece of it, and then the offensive line as well. Before we do that, we want to say thank you to Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. Each and every episode of State of the Program brought to you by Adam and his firm. Reach out to him at loweylawfirm.com. They're there for you if you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind. They give you a free and no strings attached consultation to see if you might be due compensation for your injury. Again, loweylawfirm.com. Ryan Wingo is the only wide receiver returning outside. He and DeAndre Moore. But Moore is going to be sidelined, we believe, for most of spring, if not all of it. So Ryan Wingo is the only guy coming back that's caught a pass at receiver for Texas in the spring. That opens up a lot of possibilities, whether that's one of the young freshmen coming in. There are 4 of them playing wide receiver, or a Parker Livingston, an Aaron Butler, etc. gelling with that wide receiver core and the rapport when you were built with, say, a Matthew Golden last offseason. We'd been talking about that last offseason. He really liked what he was seeing out of Matthew Golden. What do y'all think about this receiving core? Is it going to be Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore till I die? Or do you think that Arch is a guy that's going to be more of a distributor, so more guys need to step up? What do y'all think?
I think it's probably, at least early on, Bobby, it's going to have to be funneled through Ryan Wingo. I mean, I don't think it's asking too much of him that, hey, can he take a step to be a legitimate wide receiver one? I mean, if you look at where he was ranked and rated in that receiver class, in a really good, really deep receiver class. I mean, if it's not for Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Wingo may be the top receiver prospect in the country in that 2024 class. So he's got the goods to be wide receiver one. And you go back to last year, Bobby, his best game, he had 3 for 127 and a touchdown against UTSA, the game where Arch came in and played. The following week against ULM, he had a touchdown catch. Now, I know that ankle injury or whatever happened against Vanderbilt in pregame kind of stymied his season, slowed him down a little bit. But Ryan Wingo looked really comfortable with Arch. And I think that's the reps those two guys got running with that second unit. I think a lot of that's already built in. That's baked in. So I don't think they're going to have a problem forming a rapport. The other guy that I think, just based on where his status was on the depth chart, I think Parker Livingstone, because it was pretty clear that of the young guys on the roster last year, he was getting a little more run. Now we know that Sark's wide receiver rotation is never going to be, we're not talking about, a Tom Herman rotation where like 8 different guys need to touch the ball, and why are these certain guys in on third down? I mean, Sark's got his rotation pretty set, and we know there's a method to the madness. So I think it starts with Wingo, but I think Parker Livingstone, that gives him a little bit of an edge too, knowing that he's gotten some of those second team reps with Arch already.
Well, he threw a great ball, CJ, to DeAndre Moore at the end of the half against Mississippi State. What do you think of DeAndre Moore and how Sark and Arch will kind of mesh with him within with Arch as quarterback?
Yeah, I actually really like DeAndre Moore's fit here. And I know that we're talking about the deep ball, kind of coming back to life here at Texas, but DeAndre Moore can win those underneath routes, right? I look back at him being those lead blockers for a lot of those screen games, the quick games, but specifically against Georgia in that SEC championship game, the little slip and go, right? I think that's going to be a big part of it too, because we know Arch can get balls out at different arm angles, at different foot, placements. It's something very much like Quinn, where the ball can just get out quickly. So absolutely. Plus, we've seen Sark likes to go to those slot fades, those slot corners, right? Those skinny posts. And Bobby, I know that you had a point about tight ends and how they fit in this conversation as well. But the one thing I also wanted to hit on is this. Look, when Sark was at Alabama, 2019, 2020, right? Those two offenses that really put up crazy numbers with those, 4 or 5 NFL wide receivers. Those 2 years, you only had 3 wide receivers in each year with 50 or more targets. Those were the only pass catchers with 50 or more targets. So we talk about the circle of trust, or the circle of trust, as it's come to be coined as well. We're talking about 5 and 6 plus a tight end plus a running back or 2 in terms of what their impact will be in the offense. And look, Alabama, for the most part, they had Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith, and Henry Ruggs 2019.
Okay, well, let's first rounder.
I understand, but at the same point, look, you got some talent on your own offense right now, but I wanted to go back to 2024 for Texas. I talk about 2 straight years of a Sark offense only have 3 guys with 50 or more targets. Texas last year had 7. So I think you're going to see more specificity, if that's the word there, and who they're targeting, on why they're targeting, and where they're targeting. And that's going to be Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, and whoever that third wide receiver is. I don't think you're going to see as much of a emphasis on the running game or the backside of the backfield or whatnot. They're going to be throwing the ball downfield to your wide receivers to get those big plays and chunk yardages.
Well, they don't have a Jaden Blue facsimile on this team, not at this point. And so I agree with that. You said 7. Texas had 7 guys with 50 or more targets this year. Mm-hmm. Helm, obviously, Bond, Golden, Moore, Wingo? Did Wingo have 50 targets?
Wingo hit it as well as Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner.
Wow. That's impressive stats, CJ. I didn't realize that. That's a expanded circle of trust. I guess is the best way to put it. I'm interested overall to see who he gels with. I mean, frankly, Manning's like Marvin Harrison, right? They like David Tyree and what's the Mario Manningham?
Mm-hmm.
They like to find the guys that they can rely on and then dig in on and really execute with that high level on elite guys. I think that's Ryan Wingo. But to your point, there's got to be some supporting cast there. Perhaps it's Parker Livingstone. Perhaps it's a guy that we don't even know yet that might come in the portal. But of the other guys, I like Parker Livingstone, perhaps a Jamie French at this point to participate. Jeff?
Yeah, I think too, part of the reason for the target distribution last year, I think we all, and I think Sark probably assumed too, Isaiah Bond was going to be wide receiver 1. I mean, that's why you went and got him out of the portal. But I think with his injury, plus I don't think Sark thought they were going to get a 60-catch season out of Gunnar Helm. It really was organic how that happened. I don't think he planned on the target distribution being as wide as it was. And like you said, Bobby, Jaden Blue ended up being one of your best weapons in the passing game. I don't think we saw Matthew Golden having as significant of an impact as he ended up having. I think we all assumed he was good. We knew he could have an impact, but he was wide receiver 1 by the end of the year. I mean, he was your best receiver pretty much from, let's say the SEC championship game against Georgia on, especially in a playoff run. So I think that was part of it. With DeAndre Moore out this spring, I think that's a blessing in disguise because when he comes back, I don't worry about him not being, any complications physically. He's a technician. I don't worry about DeAndre Moore at all. I think this is a golden opportunity for Parker Livingstone or Jamie French, Khalil Lockett, whoever it is, to really add to that. And then you say, hopefully by the time we get to the end of spring ball, Bobby, what we're saying is, man, can you imagine how deep this group is going to be when DeAndre Moore gets back? Not, man, they really need DeAndre Moore to get back.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing you don't have to worry about DeAndre Moore is mentally. Yeah. You could talk about a toe injury could linger. You never know, right? But mentally, he's just one of those guys, first to practice, last to leave, gets it as far as what kind of commitment it takes to be a reliable player. All right. Before we go forward, I want to say thank you to our sponsor for this week, especially for the NCAA tourney. That's Ernie.com. If you are familiar with the NCAA tournament brackets, you can play it here at Ernie.com. March Madness is here, and so is the Ernie Tourney, the first ever intercollegiate bracket challenge. Think you've got the best bracket? Prove it against Oklahoma fans, Aggie fans, and the entire SEC. The school with the most points takes home the Ernie Cup, and the highest scoring bracket wins $5,000. Texas fans, this is your chance to showcase your knowledge. Don't let OU, A&M, or any other rival crowd take the crown. Rep your school and bring home the Ernie Cup. Download the Ernie Sports app or go to Ernie.com to enter now and get your bracket going. Again, that's Ernie.com or download the Ernie Sports app. Hook them for the guys over at Ernie. All right, last piece we want to talk about as we discuss the Arch Manning era, the offense as a whole prior to the first spring practice, which begins next Tuesday, a week from yesterday. The offensive line needs to gel. One full-time starter back, and that's DJ Campbell, who, frankly, split time more than anybody else with Cole Hudson. Cole Hudson moves to center. Connor Robertson's there to fight for that job. We don't know who the left guard is going to be, although we think it may be Nato Umeozulu. Nate Kibble has shown some a proclivity to maybe challenge there, we're hearing. On the outside, Trevor Gooseby may be more entrenched than anybody as a starter, frankly, because he's left tackle number 1, clearly, given what he was able to do last season in the playoffs and late in the year to play for Kelvin Banks. And then at right tackle, we either have a young guy in Brandon Baker or a guy that was very young for his age, Andre Kojo, maybe Jaden Chapman. But whoever it is, The key here will be for them to gel together. And it's hard. My problem here and my concern is it's hard to gel together as a unit if you don't know who that unit is. And so I think that Kyle Flood may need to use this spring to figure out who the unit is and then fall camp to make them gel. What do y'all think about that timing or that process of vetting who the guys are going to be and then spending the fall camp getting them to work together more? And I know that they're coaching them to work with whoever and how, but it's just not reality. We all know that. What do you think, Jeff?
A couple of things. This beats the alternative, Bobby, because you and I have said there's been springs where you and I have looked at that O-line depth chart and be like, man, can they just find 5 warm bodies that may not get your quarterback or your running back killed? Like this is a nice change of pace. So that's one. 2, Kyle Flood likes to cross train and tinker in the spring anyway. He's big on that. And Sark has talked about this spring. It's going to be, getting back to basics, a lot of teaching. So I think the nature of where the program is as a whole in terms of where your youth is, kind of that imbalance of youth and talent and inexperience, I think it's going to be a spring, Bobby, where that's going to be that was going to be the main focus, regardless of whether or not they had just one full-time starter returning. So I think the conditions were ripe for it to be a spring where, hey, let's just focus on getting the right group. My big thing is, especially in the run game, don't have any preconceived notions. Don't force anything. Like, we want to be this kind of team running the football. Last year we heard, hey, everything we do starts with outside zone. It's all about outside zone. Well, it takes a long time for an offensive line to work together to become a really good zone blocking unit, whether that's been Tony Hills has told us that on the channel. I've heard Dan Neal talk about that over the years. A lot of Casey Studdard, a lot of really good Texas offensive linemen have talked about the challenges of being a really good zone blocking unit and playing together for a long time. So I hope, Bobby, whatever their core run game concepts turn out to be, I just hope they let it happen organically and don't try to force it. I think if you do that, then the depth chart stuff will take care of itself because, look, the best coach is competition. I'm a firm believer in that. So, hey, if Andre Kojo is a better right tackle than Brandon Baker, then so be it. He's the best man. If Nate Kibble, if Kyle Flood decides, you know what, I got 2 guard spots, Nate Kibble's got to be at one of them, then so be it. So let the competition sort it out and just let your run game, let what concepts you want to lean on happen organically.
Yeah, I'm interested more so to who takes that vocal leadership point. I mean, we talk about the departures from this room. Kelvin Banks comes to mind because he's going to go first round. But look, Jake Majors with 57 career starts right in the heart of your offensive line. If Quinn Ewers was looking left on 4th and 13, Texas still would have audibled out, right, and made that adjustment because of a Jake Majors. I've talked to him plenty about that since the play occurred. Does Texas have that guy right now? You would like it to be a DJ Campbell or Cole Hudson, a guy that's played a full season, but we don't know, right? They've not been in that position yet because they've not been the elder statesman in the room. So above that, I think if there was ever a year to just kind of do away with the traditional spring bowl, it would be this year for Texas, right? A lot of new faces in the coaching staff, a lot of new faces taking over big positions at key positions in the offense. It's going to be more teaching, I think, than maybe any other spring that we've witnessed at Texas. And I think that's great because, again, a lot of unknowns and a lot of offensive line unknowns, which going on the road, start in Columbus, going to the Swamp, going to Athens, you'd like to know earlier than not what you got up front.
Yeah, I think that, look, I think we got leadership helps in the front. Personnel helps. I agree with Jeff overall, though. Let it happen organically. Don't force a square peg through a round hole. Make it come to you. And I think Sark in his run game allows for that. That's one of the things that I think Texas kind of holds the cards on a little bit is that he can maneuver that a little bit and massage it to fit what he wants to do overall. All right, that's going to do it for today's State of the Program. I do want to mention Texas plays basketball tonight in Dayton, Ohio. Good luck to the Longhorns and Rodney Terry as they take on Xavier in the play-in game, one of the first 4 here. Texas trying to get to the next round, which would then be played on Friday versus Illinois. Texas beats Xavier tonight. They play Friday against Illinois. That game tips at around 8:15 this evening in Dayton, Ohio. All right, for CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe, as well as our sponsor, Adam Lowy, over at the Lowy Law Firm, we appreciate you guys very much. We'll see you again soon here on Texas Football. Vogel.